Hi, welcome to the Liam Scheff Show. You're listening to UCY TV. It is Sunday the something of something. It is Sunday the 17th of May, 2015. Mad Men's series finale is about to be on. It's a wonderfully well-written potboiler of a show about something, about the fact that America makes us all liars, about the identity crisis that everybody goes through and not being able to be their true, authentic selves all the time. And it's, kind of brilliant for being the reflection of a narcissistic culture that's going to destroy itself. You can catch that if you have cable. I think they're running it all night long. The blogosphere will be bleeding with analysis, and probably already is, about everything that happens there. One thing the blogosphere won't be talking about is reality, because reality bites. Reality isn't fun. Reality is that we live inside of an oil bubble, that everything that we have and do and eat and drink and wear and dress our homes with and paint with is a product of petroleum, sometimes machined with a little gas, natural gas and coal along the way. But no, we live in a petro world. What's the most important thing in the world? What's the most important thing in the world? Oh, it's my kids. Oh, it's love. I've just found. Oh, it's money, of course. Money makes the world go round. No. What's the most important thing in the world? Well, how about time? I mean, we're all running out of that. Okay, that's pretty good, time. But if you don't have this, you don't even have time. What's the march against Monsanto about next week? Anybody? Anyone? Bueller? Food. Thank you. Okay, do you want me to give you more time to think about it? What's the most important thing in the world? Without which, sine qua non, without which you can do nothing. Food. Food and water. Water, of course. Water and food. Food and water, water and food. Where do we get our food from? I mean, because if we're going to protest Monsanto next week, and I am, not that I really believe in protesting, maybe I protest too much. If we're really going to go protest Monsanto and expect anybody to give a damn, and I don't, what we're asking for is for them to leave our food alone. That's what we're saying. Please leave our food alone. We like it the way that it is. But how is it? And why are we protesting Monsanto? After all, their shit just grows in a laboratory somewhere or in a field. It doesn't come to us. I mean, we don't live in that field. So how does it get to us? We should be protesting the people who bring our food to us. Should we not? Aha! I put it to you, Greg. Point of parliamentary procedure. The most important thing in the world is the thing that brings the stuff without which we cannot live, and that would be trucks. Trucks are the most important thing. We shouldn't be marching against Monsanto. We should be marching against the trucks that bring the Monsanto food to us. It is trucks. Well, wait a second. Let's dial this back one more. Gasoline. Wait a second. Why are we protesting gasoline? Because gasoline goes into the trucks that bring the Monsanto land. If we really think about it, the most important thing in the world is the thing that makes the world work. Our fields are machined by combines, planted and rowed and picked and threshed. All of the Monsanto foods that have been sprayed with natural gas fertilizer. I'm serious. Natural gas. What is it? Ethane? Ethane that's been shoved into a compressor and having nitrogen shot into it at high temperatures, and then cools into a liquid, and then they spray that on fields. We eat natural gas. We eat hydrogen and carbon. We eat it. In the real world, we should be able to eat, hydrogen and carbon that comes from plants and decaying material and other things, but no. Don't worry about that, though. It's the Mad Men season finale. It's a very exciting time to watch television, because you can see what happened. It actually didn't happen in the early 1970s. Take it all in. I'm going to spin for you a record that I made this week. I made a little ditty about why society changes, why things look one way in the 1800s and why they look one way in the 1900s, and why they're going to look a little bit different in the 2100s. I think that the future looks more like the 1900s. Sorry, the early 1900s. No. I think the future looks more like the 19th century. So we're going to talk about that. I made a little record. I put it on Facebook. It's a video. We're going to play that let it go into the run-out groove because I'm writing my new book and doing my work, and it is intense, and it is taking my every waking minute and hour. I make no room for any other things. I'm neglecting friendships with polite notes because I have to get this work done. I got to get the major work done this month of May. It's the lusty month of May. So without much further ado, we're going to jump to that record, and I hope you enjoy it. It's an interesting talk about how energy shifts, about why the Tesla dream isn't really going to be, the Elon Musk Tesla dream isn't really going to just work out. And what we should do and what we should embrace instead. In the second half hour, we're going to have more of the same conversation, but it's going to be different. More of the same, but different. Maybe we'll talk about Project for a New American Century. Maybe we won't. Maybe I'm just going to tell you this. The most important thing in the world is what brings you your food and what makes the food itself. And if you don't know what that is, let me tell you. It begins with an O and ends with an L and has an I in the middle. Let's jump to that record that I'm talking about and see how it goes. Hi, this is Liam Scheff with the Oil Alarm. I want to tell you that there's a lie going around the media that you'll probably run into. And even the great Erin Brockovich ended up putting it forward on Facebook, and much respect to her. But she put forward an article that said that we were consuming less gas, that gas consumption, oil I should say, consumption peaked 10 years ago. It's not what happened. We're not trying to consume less. We're not consuming less because we're suddenly building a tiny percentage of solar. We're consuming less because we're producing less. And this was the argument that had been put forward by many, many good minds around the turn of the 21st century, saying we're headed into a peak of production. It's going to get bumpy, and then we're going to slide down this peak. Every oil field, that you drill, you have the first one, it's under pressure, you get a geyser, then you plug in all the well holes all over the place, and you begin to produce, and you get more and more and more. And one day you hit a maximum, and you sink some more wells, but you don't get any more. And you sink some more wells, but you still don't get any more. And you sink some more wells, and you end up getting a little bit less. And then you keep pumping as fast as you can, but you end up getting less and less. You go up, and then you go down, like, emptying a glass, emptying a milkshake, or whatever you drink. That's how it works, because oil is a kind of liquid in porous rock and sandstone, and you drill in, and there's a great deal of pressure, it explodes out, and then it creeps in, and you have to pump it, and it's hard work, and it's expensive work, and you have to burn oil to get it out of the ground, you have to burn oil and gas to get the pumps to go, so it's not free. But there was so much of it, it might as well have been. We had so much oil for the first half of the 20th century that we could do kind of anything we wanted. We could waste it on anything we wanted. We could build monorails and skyscrapers, just make steel into any shape that we wanted to. And then plastic, we could change the hydrogen and carbon, the carbon-hydrogen bonds into oil after we spent most of the stuff in gas, diesel, and jet fuel, and we had some tar left. And then we had these ethylenes, and you can heat those and combine them with just a couple other chemicals, and they make these beads, these sticky things. You add a couple more chemicals, and it's a trade secret. I don't know if anybody knows. You can make everything in the world, plastic, out of it. We haven't been trying to stop using less oil. The electric car has not helped us reduce less oil. The electric car is a boutique market. What it does is it draws energy from a different energy source. It's not really even competing with oil. It draws energy from coal, nuclear, and gas. That's 5% of our 90-something percent of our energy, of our electrical grid is coal, gas, natural gas, which is a byproduct of drilling for oil, and nuclear, which is a murder-suicide plot invented in the 1940s and 50s. So we're not actually trying to consume less, and maybe we shouldn't be. When you see that in the media, oh, look how great we are. Oh, what a good boy am I. We're consuming less. Not really. We're producing less of the good stuff. Now, think about watching like a movie, like a Jane Austen movie, or reading a Jane Austen novel, if you still read. Why was it possible that people would have long correspondences and only see each other once in a while because it took a long time to get from place to place? So have these long, drawn-out, belabored, getting to know each other and misunderstanding each other, and then meeting again and seeing it a little bit differently over a couple of years. Why was it so slow to realize that maybe you sort of liked somebody or maybe you didn't? Why was it so important not to be, shamed or make a bad decision when it came to getting involved with somebody? It wasn't for romance, and it wasn't really for ethics or Christian virtue. The ethics of romance are really sort of romance it's economics masquerading as romance. What does this have to do with oil? We didn't have oil then. You couldn't drive the car up the street and visit. Well, I'm thinking of the movie version now. I can't remember the girl's name, but visit Keira Knightley in the movie version or the one on TV with Colin Firth. Whatever. I can't remember. Lizzie. You can't go visit Elizabeth Bennet and just get to know her in a couple of minutes and go out to a movie and realize that you don't have anything in common, and that's the end of Pride and Prejudice. You have to go and you get in the horse thing and you got to feed the horses and then you have to water them and you got to stay overnight because you had to go a long way. And then you stay a couple of days because it's going to be hard work getting all the way back. And there's a reason why English novels and why people acted the way that they did in them. It wasn't that they had better manners, it's that the economics of the situation, which is just another word for energy, insisted, that they stay in one place for longer. That if they traveled, they stay for a long time because they would get very tired. There's a reason why things seem to move quickly in the world of romance in the 20th century. Because you can get around, you can get away. Like, Jesus, Mr. Darcy, you're an asshole, I'm out of here. God, you're boring and stultifying, I'm out of here, you're an asshole, I'm going to go find somebody I like better. And then you get on the subway, head uptown, go to a party. It doesn't work that way anymore because we've gotten used to being able to do things very quickly. Well, this Pride and Prejudice takes place in, what's her name's life? Jane Austen's life in the 19th century, in the early 1800s, before the advent of oil. They had coal in the cities. Now look at Charles Dickens. He happens in the late or mid-late 50s, 60s, 1850s and 60s, so mid-19th century. That's the beginning of oil, but it wouldn't really have had much impact. They were using whale oil to light lamps, but they had a lot of coal. So you see a lot of kids working in factories. The factory is the beginning of the industrial age, and it's all driven by coal. If you want to know where we're headed, don't look at the last 20 years and think that we're going to have a world that looks like the last 20 years, but with electric cars and everybody having batteries to make their electric car work. You got to look at the 19th century. And it's fine to get there through fiction because, Jane Austen, for her long stories of people eventually figuring out that they can tolerate each other, I guess, to stop calling each other Mr. Or Miss, is a story about how hard it is to get around, how hard it is to make decisions, how bloody serious it is to get involved with somebody because the economics, that is the energy available to move, is so low. Once you're with somebody and you get married, they shame you against leaving because it's really hard it's energetically hard. How do I say this? You can get divorced now because you don't have to rely on everybody farming and everything to give you food and shelter and everything. All you have to do is go get some job. And you have money coming in and you trade that money essentially for oil-based energy and goods. Oil, coal, and gas. That's what you're doing. In the past, you either worked in a factory or you were in the educated class when there was one and you worked in law or medicine. And you got by that way by being an expert. Or you were an artisan and you made things out of clay and wood. But most people had to grow food. Gentlemen and people who inherited had estates that had been running for centuries. And they had many people working on them, and those people were dependent on working the land, and the people at the top were just getting kickbacks kicked up for a long time, and they had bought things and bought historical items, and so paintings, and they had big homes that had been built, but they also housed 20, 30 people who ran the house, so they were a kind of commune, if you will, or a hierarchical aristocratic commune. I guess the guy at the top had the easiest life, but everybody kind of still had to live together, upstairs, downstairs, etc. What's that show on? What's that show that's early 20th century? Anyway, it's another long, belabored English thing about how It's all about the drama, but what's interesting is to look at how hard it is to do things in a low-energy society, even in the early 20th century in a rural England. I can't remember the name of the show. It's another BBC show. But if you want, you can read about, I know it seems like a tangent, but read about the 19th century to understand that the customs reflect the difficulty of doing anything. And so things are very conservative. Well, you don't go out with somebody who's a bad character because he'll leave you, and then you're fucked. You're fucked for two reasons. One, Christianity is, like all religions, insane when it comes to making relationships, because essentially relationships are a kind of a legal codification of an economic relationship. In that economic relationship, is the man is the householder, the housebound, and the woman, the wife, is the servant to that, who provides the children so that the man has somebody to bestow inheritance on, which is another way of saying all the stuff that he accrued he has to pass to his first male heir, and everybody else has to go get a job doing something. But industrialization changed all of that. That's why relationships look different in the 20th century. Now, back to the original point, and I know I've wandered and made 2 points. The original point was that we're not trying to use less energy, but we are using a little, but not because we want to. And it's not because Elizabeth Bennet told us not to. We're using less because there is less. And it's a little less right now, but in 10 years it's going to be quite a bit, because oil wells decline. There's no way out of it. Now I want to pause, but I don't think I can get this recorder to pause. So I just have to sit here and think. Is there anything else I wanted to say? To wrap up, the future doesn't look like the last 30 years with electric cars. It looks like the 19th century. If you want to understand the 19th century, you can read fiction or you can read history. And there's plenty of history of the 19th century that's written. There's a University of Pennsylvania professor named, I think, Steinberg, who did like the best history series I've ever read or listened to. It's through that teaching company course, but it's I think 18 hours. It's 36 half hours. It generally takes the point of biography as history, and I can't remember the name, European Lives, something like that. But it's the long 19th century plus. I think it even gets into the 1700s and establishes the ancien regime, which is the inheritance of the imitation of the Roman, the Greek world mixed with the sort of flowering and the metamorphosis of the Christian church and its hierarchy in Europe, colliding with the beginning, really, of the coal and industrial era. That's where we're headed. If you want to understand the future, you'd better start understanding the past. And that will be regional too. So if you live in the foothills of the Appalachian Mountains, you can imagine that what people did, well, in Appalachia, in the early 1900s or even the mid-1900s is going to be much more important than what they did in the 1990s. The last place on Earth to get electricity is going to be the first place that's going to have to go backward. But that's not quite true, because our grid is so disastrously overstretched. Will you permit me to make one more point? How am I doing with time? Facebook has a 20-minute limit. Permit me to make one more point. Elon Musk, who I like for being inventive and for trying to empower people, and for putting something on the market that will have some value, batteries, large battery packs, which are corrosive, and you have to rape foreign countries to get their lithium and cadmium and bauxite, all these other things that these things are now made of. This is a messy process. You've got to use coal, oil, and gas to make everything in the renewables market. So don't kid yourself. Maybe you only make it once instead of doing it every day. I get that. I'm not saying that they're exactly the same, but don't kid yourself. What was I saying? Oh, yeah, the electric grid. People and people on the Aaron Brockovich thread on Facebook were saying, "Yay, we'll have electricity." We were posting electric cars. The electric car is like a crash diet that you go on before prom, to lose that extra couple of pounds. It's like the girl who wants to lose 20 pounds and doesn't eat for 2 weeks and goes on essentially speed, diet pills, drinks a lot of sugar-free whatever, and then shows up having lost 10 pounds and mostly in her neck and face, and passing out, waking up somewhere that she doesn't know how she got there in somebody else's clothes. That's kind of what we're doing. That's the electric car model. We're not all, there's some 260 million or more automobiles, internal combustion engines on the road. And I mean cars, I don't even mean motorcycles. And I'm not even sure I'm including trucks in that. Those are big diesels, and there are millions of those too. But there are 260 million passenger cars on the road in America. We can't replace those with electric cars. And even if we could dig up all the steel, all the cadmium, all the lithium, all the bauxite for the aluminum, all of the copper, incredibly toxic process to get that and melt it, heat it, purify it, extrude it into wire, wrap it in vulcanized, oil, fake rubber, and then string that all across the country. Or to put big enough solar panels so that we can now plug in our cars. Think about it. Our grid went out all along the northeastern corridor when, in summer, on one of the hotter days of the year, everybody had their air conditioner on, and a tree limb hit something in, I think, Ohio. That was it in the Northeast for, was it weeks? It was a very big deal. You'd need a grid 3 times the size and in perfect working condition to get everybody to have a car. And I'm ballparking 3, it might be 10 times the size. We're not going to be able to provide the amount of electricity going through a grid system to power 260 million cars or 100 million or even 50 million cars. We're talking a few million utility vehicles, emergency vehicles. Buses are too big to be electric. Those will be gas or diesel. And the people who say that we're going to liquefy coal and put it through that German process of making it into gas, we don't have enough coal to do that. We're going to need the coal for electricity no matter what anybody says. We're going to need it for electricity. So those are a few points to chew on as I'm writing my new book. I'm sorry this wasn't more PowerPointy, but I'm working on it. These are thoughts in process. And if you take nothing from this, go read a Jane Austen novel or a Dickens novel and imagine that that's where you lived. It's not just a charming story or a scary story about, Dickensian characters or about how to find true love, and it takes a long time. Whatever. Mr. Darcy and Lizzie Bennet, if they could have, probably, they'd be fucking other people in like a couple of months. I mean, they had nothing in common. I don't care what anybody says. I've watched that movie too many times. They have nothing in common. It's enough. And it's not perfect just because they're afraid to express their feelings. They'll always be afraid to express their feelings. And they're essentially entering into a manor-holding system. They'll have plenty of servants. They'll all distract each other. Mr. Darcy will eventually start having sex with men anyway, believe me. He's not into girls. Come on. Now we've gone off the rails. This is Liam Scheff for the oil alarm. Oh, I had you there for a little while. The future is a lot more like the past than it is the last 30 years. I mean, it's a lot like the 19th century, not the 20th, and not the late 20th. So what does it mean? It means you start digging gardens. You learn to make fuel out of hemp. We get over our fear of hemp. We got to have this stuff with the cellulose and the oil to make a kind of gasoline. We can make diesel out of it pretty easily. And it's not so hard as making electric car batteries. So we can have some vehicles around town that work. And we can have something that grows, that replaces the oil. There's a solution. Grow food, grow fuel. Get your head out of the clouds, get your hands in the dirt. Go buy my book, Official Stories, because official stories always exist to protect officials. See you next time. Oh, to be far from that madding crowd. Why does the 19th century look different? Because they had to farm, because they dug for coal, because they had some trains. They had the beginning of the machine age, but just the beginning of the machine age. By the end of the 1800s, it was a very different century. Found oil in the 1850s and put it to use, not just in the kerosene lamps that replaced the whale oil, because we're such a thoughtful species that we slaughtered almost all the sperm whale. We slaughtered anything that we could get to put blubber in a lamp. So considerate a funny monkey are we. Such is our great insight and forethought. I'm always amazed and amused when the scientific crowd tells me what a logical species we are. I'm not sure we're talking about the same animal that I see every day. We employ a little bit of short-term logic on very small projects, but the rest is pure delusion, self-congratulatory fantasy. If you don't believe me, go watch any movie in the movie theater and ask yourself why it even exists. Why do we need movies? Talk about that in the second half hour. This is Liam Scheff on the Liam Scheff Show, UCY TV and Truth Frequency Radio. You can support all the sponsors that you hear there. You can support me by going to my webpage and putting a nickel, a dime, or $20 in the PayPal. Every little bit helps. I'm an independent journalist. I am very resistant to selling out for any reason. It's a weakness of mine. My book is Official Stories. My romance, I know, it's a love book. It's called The Truth About Love. And the book coming out soon is The Oil Alarm. I will see you around the bend. Keep playing that record. And now it's time for a UCY Rewind. This is Liam Scheff on a self-promotion blitzkrieg. Let's see. I got into journalism in the early 2000s. I wrote film criticism. I wrote about the war that hadn't happened yet. I wrote about politics. I wrote a piece called The San Francisco Protest that was shortened for a college publication. Even though I was in my 20s, I had gone back to school. I was reading what I could about philosophy, history. I've always read what I could about philosophy and history, and I've never really stopped reading about history. History is the only true philosophy, by the way. If you want to understand people, don't listen to what they say. Look at what they do, not just in a moment, but over a long period of time. Then you have your answer. I began to formulate a kind of understanding of what human beings were, and I'd considered putting it into that I enjoyed, and I considered putting it into a book, just a little bit academic, and you need to make sure that you're punching it up with a lot of interesting stories from history so that it makes sense. I wrote my first book in 2012 in a massive firestorm of creative output that kind of broke my brain for a while afterward, I'll be honest. I was really heavy lifting, really intense work. And I wrote the draft in about 5.5 weeks. Then I edited for another 3 or 4. But I'd been writing it for years. I'd written hundreds of articles about the major topics in the book and dozens about the minor. So you write along the way and then you collect and collate, but you still have to make the narrative fresh. Well, now I'm writing the new book, and the new book's called The Oil Alarm. And I'm taking in as much information as I can that's going to be meaningful to the audience, because you don't need me to weigh oil field against oil field against oil field and tell you what the EIA versus the IEA versus the EIEIO tells you about, what they're doing in production. It doesn't really matter. The basic trends are enough. You get a feeling for the basic trends by looking at, what they're selling per month and what they're drilling per month over a couple of years. You got to look over a couple of years, but then you have to contextualize it, because it doesn't really matter, because the truth about oil is that we use it for everything, and until you know that, how much somebody produces doesn't really matter. Then there's the illusion that we can exchange anything else for oil, but oil is magical. That broken algae compressed over time is something that, probably will never happen again, has never happened before. We're going to talk about that as we come around the bend out of the break. Please support your independent journalist by buying his books. Go to Amazon.com and buy a box of official stories. Hand them out to friends. You will not be disappointed. It's my birthday this month, too. You can do me that favor. Bye. See you in a sec. Hi, welcome back to the Liam Scheff Show. We've been talking about Jane Austen and Charles Dickens, but why? Because they didn't know what the most important thing in the world was. Not yet. It hadn't happened. Not really. The most important thing in the world is what gives us Paris Hilton on every channel on the iPod and keeping up with the Kardashians, and even Bruce Jenner's sex changes, or whatever it is brought to you essentially by the same thing. It's the copious amount of energy we have to do really frivolous, stupid things and to make them the center of our world because we don't have to grow food. I mean, in a low-energy society, Bruce could just wear a dress and be happy. But, in a high-energy oil society, we all have to take drugs all the time to be whatever we think we should be. We actually have to go on diets because there's so much food and it's been so altered and machined and affected that it really isn't food at all anymore. I mean, food was something that grew in the ground and was full of complexity that had to be digested by the body. But what we've done, in a straightforward way, is to take away that complexity so that it could get into our body, turn into fat. We could exhaust our pancreas and make too much insulin, or is it spleen? I was getting Chinese medicine. It's spleen, pancreas is one thing. We've taken away complexity in the world in food and given ourselves the complexity of machinery. We have to go on diets because the shit we have isn't food and it makes us fat and sick. So there's a diet industry that only exists because of the oil industry. Otherwise, there is no diet industry. There's an automobile insurance industry because there's an oil industry. There's an airline industry. There's an airline pillow industry because there's an airline food industry. Well, there used to be, because now the first casualty, right? Because there's an oil industry. But when oil prices started going up, airlines had to figure out how to stay in business, so they stopped serving that regurgitated warm feces that they used to serve on airplanes. Thank God. Airplanes used to stink like mess halls. They're just the worst things in the world. Like a military, just awful, low-grade dog food. And thank God they got rid of that. Flying in planes is, of course, still very, very dangerous. But nobody cares because it's normal. So I want to present you with an idea that what we think is normal is actually not normal. What we think is normal is the shortest thing, the rarest thing, the briefest thing that's ever happened. And it's not going to remain. It's the thing that's going to go away. The thing that's going to come back is the 19th century. I can't say that clearly enough. It's time to read Jane Austen. It's time to read Charles Dickens. It's time to read, there are a dozen authors if you can get through George Eliot, I suppose. Thackeray. Let's think. There's another one that I like, and his name is going to escape me, but he really wrote these great pot boilers. They're Dickensian in that the characters that he makes are complex, slightly exaggerated, and I'm not doing you a service by not remembering his name, but I'll get it. They've made a couple of movies out of his stuff, not as many as Dickens, but it's perfect for it. It's dirtier, and I think in some ways it's more brazen and probably a little more honest to the period. Not that Dickens, was shy about murder and blood and lust and terrible things. He wasn't. He's a great writer and really a great transmitter of information. But our future is a world in which we don't have everything handed to us on trucks and trains and planes. We'll have trains if we can decide that we, run them on diesel and don't get too upset about CO2. That's what we do now. We'll have electricity if we decide we can burn coal. Otherwise, we're going to be in trouble. I'm going to skip ahead and play for you now another record that I put out, a little YouTube video that I put out about what was going on in the... Pause. Hold on, sorry. I dropped something. Sorry about that. About what was going on in the world a week ago as Elon Muscovite put forward his notion that we'd all be free to have Tesla cars. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed this little record. We'll be back right after to wrap up the show, take any questions, and talk a little more. Hi, this is Liam with the oil alarm. Whatever happens, I'm not editing this. I'm writing and researching my new book and presentation about well, not the end of oil, but the end of cheap oil. Maybe the end of good oil. Can we say that? Everybody talks about peak oil, but I think what's confusing when you get into that world is nobody says, no, there'll be oil left. It's just going to be shit. It's going to be really, really expensive and full of sulfur. Well, what's the big deal with sulfur, you say? And then you have to go start reading. Well, it corrodes metal pipes, and it's heavier and denser and hard to pull out and deeper, and you got to dig deeper and deeper, and then you got to go into water, and then you got to go a mile underwater and 2 miles under the ground. So oil gets harder and harder to get. It's not the stuff that you used to get in the Beverly Hillbillies. Those days are gone forever. But so I'm reading and reading, and I'm learning about energy efficiency, or maybe we should say energy inefficiency, because apparently what we like to do most as a species is just waste energy. We ourselves kind of suck at it, but let's get to our machines first. You take some coal, let's say you find some coal, and you think, this is great, it's better than wood, it's denser than wood. For a couple thousand pounds of wood, I can have 700 pounds of coal, something like that. So I'm going to get, iffy, right? Because it depends on how dense the wood is, and it depends on what kind of coal it is. It depends on how dense the coal is. But let's say the coal is more dense than wood, because it is. So you're going to need less of it, a lot less, and the volume is going to be a lot less, even if the weight is sometimes similar. The volume is going to be less, it's compacted. You're going to burn it, you're going to get so much heat out of it. And one day you think, man, I really like this. For some reason, boil some water and make a wheel turn. So you do that, and you think, maybe if I attach the magnet to the wheel, I can get some electricity out of it. And you do that, and you get the electricity. Well, it turns out that you've just lost, they have a ratio for it. I mean, you've lost 40, 50, 60%. You've lost so much of what you were getting you lost 10% or more in burning the wood, and you've lost another significant proportion in turning the water into steam. Now, when the wheel spins, if the wheel is good and you have the magnets in the right place, that's pretty good. You're actually getting a pretty good electrical flow out of that. Now you got to transit that across wherever your light bulb is. You've got to get copper wire. There's resistance in the wire. Eventually, you get to your light bulb. Well, by the time you do this on a large scale, and you get electricity from the place you're burning the coal to the light bulb, do you know what the average percentage of electricity you're getting into a light bulb is? Now, everybody in engineering goes, I know, I studied this in school. Well, we didn't, for some reason we were studying things that didn't matter, like fake U.S. history and fake science. Engineering and chemistry, why were we studying engineering and petroleum chemistry? Why weren't we studying these things? These are the only things that matter. The entire world is engineering and petroleum chemistry. Everything else is bullshit. TV is bullshit. Game shows are bullshit. TV drama is bullshit. Why do we care more about that? We do. Do you know how many blogs are written about Mad Men the day after Mad Men shows? There are hundreds of blogs full of thousands of paragraphs about what it means when Don Draper does something. It's more interesting than petroleum geology. But we wouldn't have any of that if it weren't for petroleum. And Mad Men is essentially about the world that was created by petroleum. It couldn't be more tied in. Well, anyway, how much of that electricity gets to the light bulb? 1 to 2%. When we burn coal, we light our houses on 1 to 2% of the electricity that we burn the coal to get. That's at the low end. There are other, what are these things called, appliances that get more, maybe up to 15. We suck. Now, before you think that that's really terrible, I know we have these new light bulbs, right, that are getting all this great, right, efficiency. Well, guess what? They get 100% more, 150%. That's right, 150% more than 2%. That's right, they get 5%, 4%. So the light bulbs that have mercury in them, that everybody has to hold their breath for 2 years if they break in your house, thanks, U.S. government, are 150% more effective. Yeah, they get 5% of the energy coming through as electricity. Okay, now Trott and Amory Lovins in the Rocky Mountain Institute. Well, it turns out that if everybody in the universe used a 5% instead of a 1%, in 10,000 years, we would to fuck off. Nobody cares. We're an inefficient species. If we really wanted to be efficient, we would be growing hemp. We'd have lamps. We'd have hemp lamps. Or we'd be generating the electric... Sorry for scratching my side in front of you. Or we'd have generators nearby, or let's get into solar now. I know, solar is the answer, right? Because with solar, we can charge our Tesla batteries that everybody's suddenly going to have. God, it's fucking outrageous, right? Oh, we're going to live in a solar world. Well, what is solar? Silicon sand, cheap. You know, they're making plenty of it. We can always get sand, and it's radioactive these days in most of the world. So good news, everybody. Sorry, a machine just went on. I wonder how efficient it's being. Sand has a very high melting point. I think it's hotter than steel to turn it into glass, but you're going to have to look that up. Ask the guys who blew up the World Trade Center with kerosene and propane. Anyway, sand has a very high melting point, and then you have to form it into these perfect little crystalline blocks that have little pyramids on the top, and you slice it with these perfectly calibrated wires. And wait a second, this sounds pretty hard to do. I mean, if we don't have high-tech, advanced factories running on coal, natural gas, and oil, how are we going to produce all this solar? Oh, never mind. We'll figure that out. We'll figure that out when we learn to turn the oceans into drinking water. Sure, it's there, right? Sometimes we have ideas, like, couldn't we drink the oceans? No. Only if you put a lot of electricity through them and take all of the stuff that's the majority of the minerals and then compact it into one toxic ball, and where are you going to put that? Then you have electrified drinking water. You've got to burn the coal or the nuclear or the oil to make the electricity, and nothing's free. But solar is supposed to save us all, so that we can each have a car. Well, that's efficient, isn't it? Okay. If we were really concerned about efficiency, don't you think we'd be talking about, I know it's almost socialist or communistic of me to say it, public transportation. I know. I didn't say it. Public transportation. Don't you think we'd be talking about revitalizing the train lines? No. We all need cars. I want to go get my double fudge ice cream at midnight. I want to do it by myself. I don't want you with me. And then I want to come home and watch Don Draper and see what's going to happen to Mad Men. So I got to get in my car to do it, because I certainly couldn't do that with anybody else. Nobody else would want to go at midnight. Oh, you would? Oh, well, then we'll carpool. So a car is built to be inefficient. Apparently gasoline was invented just to create heat in cars, because it creates precious little movement. It's an outrageous figure, but the internal combustion engine loses, on average, 75%, or something like that. 75%. I'll look it up and you tell me if I'm wrong, but it's 75% or more of the energy coming from gasoline. Gasoline, which is about half of a barrel of oil in terms of weight. You get another quarter of its diesel, and another significant portion is fuel oil, and you can mix all that together and put it in one diesel engine, but we don't. Now, diesel engines happen to be about 30 or 40 or more percent more efficient than an internal combustion engine, but we don't have those because they create soot, which is polluting. But I don't know how to break it to you, but the internal combustion engine pollutes too. I'm a cyclist, and I smell the flavored gasoline that's actually should be odorless, but they've put a scent thing in it so that we know when we're being poisoned to death. I can smell your carbon monoxide, and I don't really appreciate it. On the other hand, if we ran trams, I know, public transportation, I know, don't say it. It's communists, only communists want public transportation, don't. And if you ran trams up and down the major boulevards, you'd put down a metal track. Yeah, you got to mine the metal, but it's just one metal track going up and down, or two. And the thing can't go left and right, so you don't have to accelerate, decelerate. You're going to have very few accidents, and the thing goes along. It's got an electrical wire. I know you still have to burn the coal. You send the thing, let's say you have 10, 20, 30 trips a day. Right now, every hour, excuse me, refrigerator, I'm in the middle of something. God, how rude. Wonder what your efficiency level is. Right now, every hour, there are some 600 to something thousand cars going up and down the major highways and freeways of America. What would it be like just to have, along the big main streets, I don't know, the 405, Route 10 in Los Angeles. Well, Los Angeles is cooked anyway. Federal Highway from Miami up to Boca Raton. To have a train that went a number of times a day, even once an hour. And then what would we do for the hour? Sit, talk, have some tea, slow down, enjoy ourselves? We're not a very efficient species. And I think I've pressed that home. Nothing we do is efficient. But guess what? We're really not efficient. I mean, we aren't efficient. We get 25% of the energy out of the food that we eat. The rest, right in the toilet. And some heat. But also some tummy rumbling. We're not efficient. I don't think we can make ourselves become efficient. So I know that the Amory Levins and the Rocky Mountain Institute group want to make everybody totally efficient. They want to make 10-pound cars that, recycle all their braking energy, and then we can all have cars. I'm going to tell you something. It's not going to happen. And, I didn't even get to solar. Solar has a built-in inefficiency. They call it like energy, something capacity. When you buy a 100-watt solar panel, 100-watt, 100 joule, 100-volt, 100-watt solar, which has to do with the speed that the energy is delivered, can't they just simplify this? It'll have something on it about capacity. And that it'll be like, 25-watt capacity. That's about how much energy you're going to get out of your 100-watt panel. They're telling you that even though it could, under optimal conditions, if you had the brightest light on Earth and shined it into it for a period of time, produce what they advertise on the top that it'll produce, underneath, under the capacity limiting factor, that's really what you're going to get, for a variety of reasons. They'll tell you. They'll tell you, it's an average. The sun doesn't shine most of the time. You're at the wrong angle. We're not hitting the little triangles that we machined through silicon that we had to heat to very high temperatures, even though it's free energy, right? I mean, the sun's free energy, but solar panels aren't. And yeah, I'm in favor of solar, but we're not going to make electric cars out of solar energy. We'll be lucky if we keep the lights on in our houses with solar energy. These things are expensive to make. And the batteries that we need to store the energy in, because by the way, once you create the solar energy, guess where it goes? Up your, nowhere. I almost said that, but it goes nowhere. You either use it or it's gone. The great thing about oil, and the reason we used oil for so long, is you can take it with you. Put it in a container made of oil. Hey, it's kind of self-replicating. Coal, put it in your pocket. Give it to a kid at Christmas. Whatever. You can take it with you. Solar energy, yeah, it shines on you, but you build a big panel. You then absorb all this energy. Then what? You either use it or it's gone. Now, Elon Musk, Tesla wants to come along, and I like the guy, sure, he's a dreamer, he's active, in his imagination, and he wants to have everybody have these batteries. But what are these batteries made of? What's the energy efficiency of them going to be? Not bad, it's pretty good. Batteries are more efficient, let's say, than the internal combustion engine, but then you got to deliver it, and how good is the machine that you're delivering it to going to be? You'll have some loss, you'll have resistance in the wires, you'll have some mechanical loss, you'll have some heat loss. More than that, what are you generating the electricity from? Nuclear? Thanks, no, thanks. Fix Fukushima first. I don't even want to hear from you assholes. Fix Fukushima first. Go fix Chernobyl. How do you have the balls to come into the world and say, the new nuclear is going to be great, really? Fukushima. You clean up your first mess, and then I'll maybe consider listening to you. I know, right? We're not giving you enough of a chance, really. The most subsidized energy form on the planet, except for solar, which is now becoming the most subsidized form of energy on the planet, because it ain't cheap, and it's hit and miss, and you got to have a lot of computers angling the things. And God, if a wire goes out, if you make the mistake of installing, a Microsoft operating system, the whole thing's fucked. It's just over. Or the new Apple stuff. I'm not very crazy about it. I mean, it's all gone downhill. All heavy metals. You got to go and get cadmium to make these batteries. So we got to go invade Bolivia, one of the poorer countries on Earth. Maybe not spiritually, but in terms of our ridiculous way of looking at it. And we got to ruin their environment to pull up all the cadmium so all of us can imagine that we can continue to live the wanking Xbox lifestyle that we imagine is our birthright. I will say it again. Why do we imagine that this is the best stopping place in world history for us to freeze frame and say, this is how we have to live forever? Really? Maybe 1879 isn't that bad. No world wars. Isn't that good enough? Do I have to continue? We hadn't had any world wars at that point. Sure, there'd been plenty of fighting, but it'd been sort of local. Nothing's easy. Nothing is very good about switching energy, and oil is terribly inefficient, coal is terribly inefficient, and by the way, coal is more efficient than almost anything. And maybe that's why we used it for so long. And maybe, and I know nobody wants to hear this, maybe the best thing we could do with our existing energy infrastructures, instead of shuttering all these coal plants, we could figure out how to, and I'm not as worried about carbon dioxide as some people. I know, that makes me terrible. I'm just not as worried about it as some people. But if you want to worry about it, worry about the mercury and whatever else, other metals would come through, lead, arsenic, whatever else would come through. And let's clean that up. Let's put big cigarette filters, when we're burning the coal, and then send them in a rocket ship to the sun. Let's figure out how to clean up the thing that we already have. Is that wrong to say? Because we got a long, several decades, maybe a couple hundred years, maybe more of coal. And if we actually had to manage it and not run an entire 260 million car fleet on it, maybe that would be okay. And maybe we wouldn't be in such a rush to make so many mistakes, because we're going to make so many mistakes with solar, and a lot of them will be irrevocable. We're going to tear up desert. We're going to put incredible solar arrays in the desert to cities that won't exist in 20 years. The southwestern cities won't exist. They won't have enough water. We won't be able to continue to waste the water to pump them to vacation homes, essentially. And we're going to invite people back into the rainy latitudes and longitudes. Really, what do you think is going to happen? You think the California drought goes away when you stop paying attention to it? Apparently a lot of people do. It's not just California. It's all the way over to Austen. And that was our top record of last week. Thanks for hanging in on this live and best of show. What is going to happen to those western cities? What is going to happen to those western cities? How long can we keep up the illusion, the pretense that Los Angeles isn't over? A friend of mine wrote me and said that they're inland, more desert, being limited to 2-minute showers. Now, I didn't follow that up, so that's what they call hearsay. But limits are going in all over the place. The pretty beach towns where tourists like to go, by the way, are still allowed to water their lawns and pretend as though everything is fine. California will be thinking about building nuclear power plants to desalinate water. If we're having a contest for the dumbest idea ever invented, I think Fukushima already took it, but of course California can become Fukushima too, bring the radiation right home. No reason not to. I mean, we've already destroyed the world, haven't we? I mean, there's really no reason to be careful about anything, because it's all done. Jellyfish, the length of, miles of jellyfish, what is 10 city blocks? What is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5? I think 15 is a couple of, it depends on the city. I mean, in New York, 15 blocks is a couple of miles. So a couple miles or a mile and a half or something like that of dense jellyfish are off the Puget Sound or off of Washington. The fish catches are down to 99%. Not always, but that's extinction level, isn't it? I mean, that's serious to a degree that I don't think we humans have ever encountered in our lifetime. We hear about the dodo going extinct. We hear about Pauly Shore's career going away. But we don't hear, thank you, we hear about entire groups of fish. I mean, we're talking millions and billions of life forms just not being there anymore. We've got the Fukushima leak coming in from Japan, and now we're going to try to desalinate California's seawater so that people can continue to live a life that's going to go away anyway because oil is running down. As I said in the first bit, Miss Erin Brockovich, much respect to her, much deep respect to her, posted and shared an article, and I think it was on the Bill Maher show, which I didn't see, but she was talking about, if she was talking about the article she posted, she's saying that we're using less oil and that, what do they call that? Consumption. Consumption is down. Well, this is a funny way of patting ourselves in the back for running out of something. We're running out of something. We're not consuming less because we're teetotaling. We're not consuming less because we're, being such good boys and girls. We're consuming less because there is less to consume, and that's the direction that we're going in. We're going to continue to consume less, and it's going to continue to get painful. Sorry, it hasn't gotten painful yet. We're going to feel that pain soon, and I think forever and ever. I don't know any other way to put that. The solutions are right in front of you. Your neighborhood has a place to grow food. If you're in the city, you can get into hydroponics and aquaponics, and I would do it immediately. I wouldn't wait till the government issues a warranty or an edict or some sort of offer. I would simply do it Don't wait, just do it. And people will come in. If you're looking for investment, I guarantee you will have investors. If you put forward a wonderful project to grow food in your neighborhood and put it out to everybody, everybody can put a little money into the kitty, and then you'll be growing food. You'll be reaping so much that you'll be able to sell in farmers markets if that's your thing. Otherwise, you can just save on the enormous grocery bills that everybody else is going to be paying by going to the whole Walmart. Whole Foods and Walmart, by the way, are one store. They all get their stuff from Monsanto land. We all get our stuffs by that most important thing in the world, gasoline and trucking. This is the Liam Scheff Show. I thank you very much for joining me today. I will see you around the bend. Please support independent journalism by buying a book. I'm not just saying it. Please go do it. If you already have official stories, go buy a few copies for some friends. Keeps me motivated and keeps the information going around. See you next time. Are you ready for the march against Monsanto? I am. I've got my saccharin, my NutraSweet, my PCBs. I've got my Remember St. Louis hat and T-shirt. I've got my Agent Orange, Agent Purple, and Agent Green ready to spray on anybody that I meet. I've got glyphosate cornflakes ready to feed to all the kiddies. It's March Against Monsanto next week. Find it in your neighborhood, join up, and walk along. I don't really like marching against things, so let's maybe march for Monsanto. Let's march and hope that everybody discovers who they really are. Let's march so that transparency is the watchword of the day, and everybody's suddenly concerned about what's going in their guts. I know that's not going to happen, but let's just hope. But putting aside hope, let's decide to plant some food. Yes, it's the real march against Monsanto in your backyard. Monsanto can't tell you what to grow in your backyard. You can put it in a box, 4x6, 4x4, 4x8, 2, 3, 4 of them. If you have a condo, get it with your condo association and decide to plant all your planters with trees that grow food and pretty herb, sweet potato, and turnip gardens. They're wonderful, and you can put in butterfly attractors too to make it really sell to that homeowners association crowd. It's time to be growing food, America. It's time to be growing food, Kansas, Florida, New Hampshire, Missouri, Mississippi, Illinois. It's time to grow food, Idaho. It's time to grow food, what remains of California, Washington, and Oregon. It's time, Dakotas, to grow food, not just fracking fluid, but food. You can do it. You can go get a couple pieces of wood, slam them together. It doesn't have to be pretty. You can get some old rusty nails. You can do it with twine. It doesn't really matter. You just got to hold the sides together, put a weed mat on the bottom. You can use cardboard if you want, although I wouldn't recommend it, but you can. And grow food. Put dirt in and plant seeds. Get good dirt. Get dirt that has guano in it. Guano is poop from animals, and you want a little of that. You can get worms from your own yard and put them in the dirt, and they'll make more. You can take your crushed newspaper and any other thing that you have laying around the house and make more stuff out of it with worms. Your carrot tops, if you have carrot tops, your carrot bottoms, whatever, your squash middles, whatever you have, you can compost and feed them to worms and bacteria and make more soil to make food. That's the real fight against Monsanto. It's in your backyard. It's nowhere else. It's not out on the street ringing bells saying we're not going to take it. This is what democracy looks like, or any other such thing. The whole world is watching. Who cares? Grow food. Doesn't matter if the world watches you growing food, because you're going to have the food that you're growing. Isn't that much better? This is Liam Scheff. Go buy a book. See it, the march against Monsanto, but really the march in favor of growing